films are designed to you up a bit. Toying with our sense of sight and sound continuously, these movies, more so than any other genre, are crafted as sensory overloads, making it so that we can't trust our own eyes or ears throughout their runtime. There's plenty of films that subvert this experience across the board, with touch, smell, and taste utilised just as effectively as sight and sound. Films that can make us feel the physicality of their craftsmanship hold a special kind of scariness, ingraining themselves in our primal human nature as much as just being a spooky watch. A monster that manipulates your very sense of being and warps everyday reality is one that will stick with you. With that in mind, here are 10 films that mess with our human experience to the extreme, making us hold our breath, peer behind the cushion, and leaning closer with each play on our senses. Just be thankful smell-o-vision hasn't been invented yet. I'm Ash from What Culture, and these are 10 horror movies that max out your senses. 10. Jerusalem. Found footage filming can be best described as divisive. Some love the jolting first-hand experience of camcorders, others are left reaching for the Dramamine. But there's no denying the ingenuity of the style as it's developed over the years. Jerusalem capitalises on the point-of-view experience of found footage by taking the core idea to the next level, attaching its camera to the glasses of our protagonist in the form of Google Glass. Unfortunately, Jerusalem doesn't uphold its originality throughout the rest of the film's production, telling the tale of two American tourists in Israel when a biblical nightmare unfolds over the city. It's choppy and disorganised, and the effects are a bit silly, but that doesn't detract from the central genius Glass premise that sucks you into the narrative in the first place. Great examples of immersive vision in this way can be found in the VHS franchise segments Amateur Night, which also utilises glasses, and Phase 1 Clinical Trials, which has its camera directly in ocular implants. But these don't define the entire film, as in Jerusalem. 9. A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place plays with our hearing in a way that frightening films should all aspire to. When Earth is invaded by monstrous predators that attack sound, silence is the only protection that one family can rely on, though that soon becomes threatened when mother Emily Blunt falls pregnant. Cleverly toying with sounds in varying intensities, we experience the family's hushed attempt at living alongside true, deafening silence, depicting what it would actually be like to live without sound as a given everyday experience. When we do hear noise, we're then trained to be terrified, meaning we're constantly listening out for any potential threat throughout the duration of the movie. It's a simple premise, but one made extra effective by involving the audience in its sensory manipulation. As if babies weren't terrifying enough. 8. Sinister. Sinister is a film that utilises sound as its main effect when it comes to horror, relying on uncomfortable noises and a disturbing soundtrack to relay cues for fear rather than horrifying visuals. I mean, if watching a family hang together in their back garden on their own home movie tape counts, of course. Where horror films usually use sound to signify jump scares and build tension, Sinister manipulates a series of horrible effects to create truly uncomfortable sequences of music. It's no surprise to learn that composer Christopher Young writes his music in a room full of jack-o'-lanterns when you hear the strained whispers and disconnected synths. The film itself follows true crime writer Ethan Hawke, who moves into a house previously occupied by a murdered family. When he discovers a series of grisly home movies in the loft, a supernatural force seems to be responsible for the deaths, which he vows to solve the mystery of in the name of getting a new bestseller. Writers, eh? 7. The Eye. In the same way many films of the genre use visuals as their predominant sense to frighten an audience with, The Eye follows convention by offering up its scary moments in things we can see. In this case, ghosts. Jessica Alba plays a blind violinist who manages to get a cornea transplant, resulting in her vision returning in full force. In fact, it comes back so well that she can even see things that aren't there. Now that's getting your money's worth. Realising she can predict upcoming disasters thanks to her newly installed eyeballs, there's plenty of unsettling moments throughout, as well as lots of cringe-inducing eye-related touching. No thank you. Based on the 2002 movie by the Pang brothers, both movies depict a reality where vision can't be trusted. We don't know what we're seeing and when it's real, with everything relating back to the very sensory organ we rely on most in day-to-day life. 6. The Sixth Sense. Famously birthing the endlessly requoted line, "I see dead people." The Sixth Sense tells a tale of a young boy with the ability to see and communicate with the dead. Treated by psychologist Bruce Willis, the pair try to understand his gift and put it to good use. Of course, in typical Shyamalan stylings, the big twist reveals itself to be that Willis was in fact a ghost all along too. In this way, we've been subjected to Cole's extra sense for the entirety of the movie, forcing us to consider his interactions and our perception of them in an entirely new light. The film is one of those special creations that has to be watched twice to get the full effect, altering the way we see in a manner that truly takes the sensory experience to a new level. 5. Chilling visions. 5 senses of fear. It's fair to say that the clue is in the title for Chilling Vision's 5 Senses of Fear. Set in an anthology format and exploring horror stories related to each of our senses, respectively listed as smell, see, touch, taste, and listen, the film functions as 5 short stories rather than including any interlinking content. Making us consider each of them as a weakness, each chapter explores the specificity of our senses and the terror that can be induced from isolating them from the rest. Whether it be through the scent of a cologne resulting in hideous side effects or a song that kills its listeners, 5 Senses of Fear creates truly original punishments for the human body in capacities that we often take for granted. 4. Don't breathe. Rather than the old, frail and helpless expectation one might have of an elderly man living without his vision and on his own, we're instead presented with an unstoppable force of nature. It's just a pity he's such a dick. When 3 friends decide to break into the old man's house and get stuck, it seems fair game that he meets them with some aggression. What you don't expect is a basement dungeon inhabited by a forcefully impregnated young girl kidnapped by said old man, and for him to murder them all in a state of perfect calm. See what I mean about being a bit of a dick? Don't Breathe will have you doing exactly as the title instructs, holding out against any noise for a very real, very human threat to pass. Sound and sight again become tantamount to survival, with our protagonist scrabbling for both at any given moment. 3. Raw. If there's ever a horror film that can make taste a source of fear, it's the visceral cannibal movie Raw. Telling the tale of veterinary student Justine and a desperate bid to fit in, we watch as she tastes raw meat for the first time in a previously wholly vegetarian life. Developing a taste for flesh in all its forms, it isn't long until fingers, torsos, and even bikini lines become fair game for a midnight snack. Don't say I didn't warn you. The gruesome depictions of gory feasts are enough to bring bile up the back of your throat and feel the texture of flesh in your mouth. It doesn't shy away from the squirm-inducing nature of these things, rather reveling in Justine's discomfort at her newfound compulsion. We're taken on an uncontrollable journey of blood and guts, and rather than grossing audience out with spilled abdominal contents, we're subjected to imagining just what they might taste like. Maybe I'll take my finger burger with a bit of mayo at least. 2. The Babadook. The Babadook is a perfectly stylised and carefully crafted allegory for mental health, bringing about as much a life lesson as it does a frightening experience. In terms of the latter, however, just as much care and due diligence has been given to just how the horrors on screen are presented. Utilising noises and soundtrack that work in much the same way as Sinister, a grating, uncomfortable and downright unpleasant experience of sound is never quite far off. Especially when it comes to young son Noah as he screeches his way through the narrative. Toying with light and dark, shifting shadows into terrible silhouetted creatures, and combining these with the fight or flight inducing noise of the Babadook himself, the film becomes something more than a horror story, but truly an experience. Even the visions play on taste, smell and touch, with glass shards in food and inky black vomit offering more than the staple spooky moments. 1. Hush. Hush reverses our expectations for this type of horror movie by positioning us with a protagonist unable to utilise the same senses a larger audience will have at their disposal. Unlike other films that follow a sensory formula, the audience is subject to Maddie's alternative lifestyle, instead aligning most watchers with the murderous intruder that can capitalise on a condition. It's refreshing to see a movie with a disabled protagonist that gets the best of her attacker, honing her wits against his full set of senses and coming out on top regardless of being able to hear or shout for help. What he assumes as weakness works as a strength, alongside challenging audience presumptions in the process. It's tension crafting at its finest, and stands out against a slew of horror movies that create monsters you can't see or hear by flipping the playing field. By cutting out certain options for senses, all of them get heightened tenfold.